speaker, we're very pleased to have Holly McQuillan. She is a zero waste specialist. She's a fashion designer, educator and researcher from Massey University, New Zealand, and the New York Times has coined her one of the pioneers of zero waste design practice. She's going to provide us with a good overview of the process, and then we'll have a panel discussion that will involve some local businesses who are also looking to minimise their fabric and yarn waste use. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about this thing that I do and that a number of other people do, which has a couple of different names, none of which I'm entirely sure where they came from. It's kind of a fuzzy history, I guess, but I call it zero waste pattern cutting. It can be zero waste fashion design, and there's kind of different facets to it. So today I'm going to talk specifically about the pattern cutting process that I use and its historical precedents and the reason why and all that sort of thing. So zero waste pattern cutting is a design practice that from the start it intentionally embraces uncertainty and risk-taking in its process. And so for a lot of people in business, that kind of freaks them out of it. The idea that you want to be taking risks with something and not knowing for sure what it's going to be like, it can be quite frightening. But the intention of it is about responding sensitively to materials. It's about going back to treasuring the raw material, because I kind of see that in a lot of cases fashion designers perceive the textile as just a raw material, but it's had so much energy and time and design put into the production, the design of the textile itself, even before we get it. And then as a fashion designer, it's kind of the aesthetics of it are used, and how it's used, how efficiently it's used is of less concern unless it's for economic benefit. So it's also a step away from quite an egocentric, hierarchical designer at the top. Then feed your ideas down to pattern making and sampling and that kind of hierarchical sort of arrangement. And it's a completely new model of a garment design and production, all kind of wound up together in a kind of collaborative process. And it aims fundamentally to eliminate the production of waste from the production of clothing, with the ultimate goal of revealing exciting new form and shape. So it's can be about reproducing what we already have and want. That is definitely possible, and I'm going to show you some examples of how that's done. But it's also about potentially a new aesthetic. So what kind of new shapes and forms can we come up with in terms of fashion that really excite consumers? So this is an example from Timo Rissanen, who is many of you may have heard of. He was at UTS in Sydney and now is at Parsons School of Design in New York. And he's another zero waste expert out there, a good friend of mine. And he did this as an example to show that it's really easy to do a bad zero waste design. So in the background you see quite a beautiful tailored coat, and he used an old blanket so there wasn't using new materials and things. And he just cut that in the traditional pattern making method. And with all the leftover bits, he kind of cobbled together a waistcoat, which some people might like it, but he's kind of trying to frame it as it's just kind of, you've not thought through the process of making both those garments. You're only thinking about the design of one of them, and the rest of it is either waste or a bit of a hash job. So whenever I show this slide, he wants me to make sure that it's intentionally bad. So take that away with you if you like. When you're designing zero waste pattern cutting or zero waste fashion design, it requires quite a major shift in perception of how to design clothing. Traditionally, you draw a 2D sketch or a spec drawing of what you want the finished design to look like, and it's usually front and a back, sometimes you might have side views, you might have some detail views, sometimes you might show the lining of the inside. But it's primarily the front, and most fashion is kind of consumed from that front perspective. When you think about catwalk shots, you know, all the photographers are down the end of the catwalk and they're clicking away furiously as the stuff's coming towards them, and they all put their cameras down and then turn around and walk away again. And so but the reality is that fashion is this 3D thing. Like, we're constantly seeing all sides of people and all sides of the garments that they wear, and so it's kind of strange that so much of the way we consume fashion and design it is from a very two-dimensional perspective. And so this is a little wee graphic from Julian Roberts, who is a UK-based inventor, I guess, of subtraction cutting, which is a completely mind-blowingly different way of designing clothes. And he's looking at, the first image is a house, and so that's like the front view that we're also used to seeing in fashion of houses. And then the next one, it's the same house, but you see it directly from above, and so it's a bird's eye view of it. And how many times do you think about seeing clothes from that perspective or from an alternate perspective? You kind of don't. The only example that Julian can think of and that I can think of is a circle skirt. And everything else is like you got front and back. Sometimes you have the side kind of for like a jacket. And then the third one is that's how you actually make the house. So you kind of unfold the whole thing. And that's like the schematic for how you make this thing. And so when you're designing zero waste fashion and subtraction cutting, you have to think in the third way. You have to think about this whole thing as a 2D and a 3D object at the same time. You're considering all kind of different points of view, and all the different decisions that you make have a direct impact on each other. It's a very holistic way of designing. And so you can see here you've got the classic front pattern or view of the skirt, and then if you've got a top-down view, it's the circle skirt, and then what would it look like if you were looking at all views at the same time? How would that impact on the design? Go through a top or a dress, same kind of thing, and a pair of pants. The trousers, I've actually tried to make the last ones at the end there. It's quite exciting. It's just you need to try and think of clothing as quite a different thing. And one of the advantages that you have with zero waste fashion is that clothing is made of soft materials, and so it's quite forgiving. It moves with the body, it folds, it's not stiff, it's kind of restrictive, so you've got a lot of freedom in terms of design. So the other thing that you that's related to that is rethinking the way having side seams. You know, the tradition of side seams and things being in a certain way, conventions of fashion. They're there, but they don't need to be there. This is an example of a series of 10 t-shirts which are all exactly the same shape, but the patterns for each of them are completely different. So they've eliminated classic armholes and the shoulder seams and side seams, and everything's been kind of shifted and moved around, but it makes a basic t-shirt. And so you can see it's really, really plain on the screen, but the pink one shows better. Those are all the patterns for those t-shirts. Okay, so zero waste isn't new, not in the slightest. It's rather old. It's as old as time, and one of the things that I'm always at pains to kind of mention whenever I talk about this is that I don't think anybody in the last 100 years invented this. You know, it's been around forever. It's not new. You can see it in saris, in historic Roman clothing. You can see it in pretty much every single historic culture, from the moment somebody killed an animal, skinned it, cured the hide and wrapped it around them. That's zero waste fashion. So it's been around for as long as we have. And it's kind of been developing over time. The kimono was, for me personally, was my first exposure to this idea when I was doing my master's about 10 years ago. I kind of just dawned, I was like, oh my goodness, this is often made from a single piece of fabric or woven to specific lengths, and then turns into this very beautiful piece of clothing, which is unlike a lot of things that Westerners are used to, and a lot of folk costumes. So in Finland, there's a lot of examples of zero-waste clothing, very simple garments, which are made up of squares and triangles and that sort of thing. Another example, it's getting slightly more complicated. Things get, like over time, people started to think more kind of strategically and carefully about how you can put these together to get different design options. But then it kind of disappeared for a long time, like it kind of stopped. The Industrial Revolution happened, cloth became extremely cheap, and so it didn't make sense in that context to be concerned about wasting material because it was relatively speaking quite inexpensive. And it's just better to be able to really quickly, really fast generate a new, design. But in the early 1900s, part of the futurist movement, there were some examples of zero waste unisex coveralls, which they actually sold 1,000 of them, which I actually think is quite interesting, for that time period, both men and women, and that's the example on the far side there. In the 1950s, Bernard Brodowski came up with a kind of collection of very simple, once again, squares and rectangles approach to this. Claire Mercado is an American designer in the 1950s. Did a lot of very simple American sportswear and style, simple garments. Like that skirt is literally just a great big rectangle with a cinched in lace. And then in the 1970s, Zandra Rose who was just so passionate about her textile design that she didn't want to waste any of it. Like she just loved the stuff that her and her colleagues were developing, that she didn't want to just arbitrarily cut through the print. And so the textile design, like textile design, directly informs the shape of the garment itself, the patterns that are made from it. So this is Yoli Ting, and in fall 2009, her entire collection was zero waste. And she's been kind of exploring this idea of pattern efficiency and cloth efficiency for a long time, since about the early 1980s. And so she's a sort of a proponent of it. Tara St. James is a New York-based sustainable fashion designer whose initial collections were almost all zero waste, and have kind of been evolving to include other sustainable initiatives within that as well. She also does things like the dress in the bigger picture there. She re-releases that dress every season. It just gets a slight upgrade in terms of fabrication or colour. And so because it's called a four-ways dress, it can be worn multiple ways. It's actually more than four. Like I was playing around with it when I was in New York last year, and I came up with another 3. And she said, "Oh, okay, so it makes it the 7-way dress, great." And so this idea of longevity, when you're designing zero waste, it's very hard to design for a trend. And so it becomes a new aesthetic. It's not about being trendy or cool or anything. It's about appreciating the way fabric moves and hangs on the body. Mark Liu, who's some of you may know, Australian, and his work is quite a different kind of approach to zero waste pattern cutting. You use a lot of laser cutting to deal with the space between the pattern pieces, which I think is really fascinating, and using that space between to develop it into an external textile application. Alice Sutton from Salvage to Salvage, recent graduate of Canberra, and I find her that pattern cutting is beautiful. It's very simple. If you look at the patterns, very simple. It's very minimalist. And a lot of the criticisms around zero waste is it's too complicated, but there's some fantastic examples out there of very, very simple approaches and very complicated. It depends on the market, what you want to do and how you want to kind of approach it. This is, you saw it in the WGSN slide, this is Tima Rissen's hoodie that he designed. And you can see that's the pattern for that hoodie, and it's very difficult when you first look at it to try and work out how is that a hoodie. how does that happen? And it goes back to those initial slides where you have to shift your perception of where a side seam should be or where certain things should happen. And that enables you to completely redesign the garment, and yet the finished aesthetic is not so far removed from what you would expect a hoodie to be. Same goes for a pair of leggings. The pattern for the strappy kind of tights are directly below the photo, and then the jacket is actually the one closest to me. And so it's all cut on the straight, but when it's on the body, it's on the bias. And so you kind of cut one way and it's sewn another, and when it's worn, it's just like quite a cool denim jacket. This is another example of his, a pair of pajamas, which he's also dealing with ideas of mending and longevity and kind of infusing a fashion object with greater meaning, and also the ability to, within the garment itself, is extra material that you can use to mend it in the future. So part of using the waste is about its second life, or if it needs preparing in some way, it's used as part of that. Finished garments, that's a pair of pajamas.
Bed sheet or something.
Yeah, it was I think his grandmother's bed sheet. Big holes in it. You drew attention to those holes, you can see it's on the leg of the pant there. So it's about conspicuous mending, and so not trying to be ashamed of damage and its repair, but kind of loving that history of that garment. And this one here is quite interesting. The shirt, the endurance shirt, is one of the ones that includes extra fabric for mending within the design of the shirt itself. There's a panel down the back, which is kind of hand quilted into it, which you can remove and use to fix the garment if something happens. And he developed that pattern a wee while ago. And this one here is the same pattern, but for a different fabric width. So it makes the exact same garment, but it makes it using a different width of fabric. And so you, the kind of issues in terms of production can be resolved because you're dealing with quite simple shapes in some cases, but you're dealing with kind of squares and rectangles, and you just kind of move things around a little bit like a puzzle, and then eventually it fits and you can get it to work. And once it's established, then the production process is pretty much exactly the same as you would expect. Oh, can you see it? Can't really hear me. Okay, this is, anyway, so there's two patterns hidden in there somewhere. And from a student of mine who did her master's at Massey University, Julia Lumsden, and she was looking, she's got a very minimalist aesthetic. She's really, really passionate about designing menswear that isn't flouncy, frou-frou, or big or anything. And so she set herself the challenge of designing men's business shirts using zero waste. And she came up with 18 designs, and at first glance you would never know. They just look like a standard men's business shirt. And she road tested them. She had a bunch of businessmen of all ages wear them to corporate meetings and all kinds of stuff. And there was no one said a word. They didn't notice, absolutely nothing. The other thing is that the amount of fabric used for those designs in every single case was less than 90 centimetres of a standard width of fabric. So it's highly efficient, and the aesthetics have a they're interesting, but they're not kind of crazy. You know, it's not like so different that it's not wearable by the market. And so this is my very first foray into the idea of designing without wasting. And this was my part of my master's project. And so these pieces, there's actually 5 of them, there's only 3 here, but there were 5 dresses that were all designed from the same width, length piece of fabric, and then cut into, but not cut apart, and turned into completely different dresses. They could also be made into a dress, unmade again, made in a different way, and so transformable throughout, you know, whoever was wearing it, what they wanted to do with it, how they wanted to present themselves to the world as. Some details. I used a lot of embellishment, printing, using up some of the pieces in kind of slightly unusual ways. This is the pattern for the piece that was in the WNC slideshow, the white hyperbolic tessellation. And so it's a way of dealing with the waste where you use tessellation, like you see a pavement, crazy paving type thing, and it's that kind of idea. But the problem with a lot of previous examples of this approach is that they use triangles or squares, and the body's rounded and soft, and we don't have angular bits, generally. And so I wanted to use something that was sympathetic to that, and so it kind of developed through looking at mathematical precedents and physics and astrophysics and all kinds of crazy things like that, and I ended up with a hyperbolic tessellation. Hyperbolic just means it gets bigger and smaller, and so it's bigger in the centre and smaller at the salvages down where the blue is. And so it makes that, but it can make anything. Those pieces get laser cut, and it's about working with the consumer to develop the design that they want. It's still in development. One of the key things that I'm working on currently is how to attach them to each other, and also it's the kind of textile that most lends itself to is like a felt or a non-woven, so you don't have to finish the edges. This is an example of a jacket which, on the other criticisms of zero waste, is sort of raiding and not being able to fit multiple different sizes. And this jacket here fits New Zealand size 10 to 14 within the same pattern, just by overlapping the front, back, and then it's got like a storm fit. It's kind of like a frock coat / trench coat type thing. And so just overlap that more or less, and so that's the area of fit that's important. It's across the shoulders and across the bust. And so the more you overlap it, the smaller the size gets. The more you open it up, the bigger it gets. So it's the same pattern. And I've also played around with putting it on different fabric widths, so that if you wanted it in one colour and it was only available in a certain width fabric, you can manipulate that so that it fitted on 150 centimetres for one design, and a very slight tweak on the designer could fit on 125 centimetres. Part of the process that I use is making small scale toiles of it, and so this is a half scale little wee mannequin. And just to test the design, I also do a lot of paper, not to scale, like just printing out on A4 paper, cut it up, stick it together with like masking tape to try and work out, does this work? It's really rapid and easy and cheap, and just to make sure that before I'm committing to cutting out of fabric that it's going to work. And then I move into using, I do it a lot digitally, and then it goes into the Gerber, or like Optex or that kind of system, so that I can print it out into a plotter, or you can to the cutting. This particular jacket was made out of an old set of curtains for a design project that I was asked to do for an exhibition. And so I took a year's part in a set of 1970s curtains and wanted to see what I could come up with. And it was very much kind of speaking to the kind of sound of music thing, which I also grew up with. Like, the first clothes I made were out of curtains. Great. This is an example which you can see over there, the first jacket. And it's digitally printed. The lining and the outer are the same fabric, the same pattern design, but with different textile print on them and made of loose fabric. Yeah, and so the outside it's meant to be referencing a wool from sheep's clothing, and so you can see on the outside at the moment it could be the lining or it could be the outer, and it's when you lay it flat, it's a sheep's skull, and the inside it's a wolf's head. And so it's combining zero waste pattern cutting with digital textile printing. And so you can see on the slideshow there, that's me kind of working out the pattern so that it looks like a wolf. I don't know if you can see the wolf and that's the sheep, did me trying to and the wolf as well. And so there's a lot of issues around finishing with zero waste and making sure you can finish the garment properly, and that's the easiest way to do it. Have it reversible and lined in the same fabric, well not same fabric, but same width fabric. That sort of revealing here. So I do a lot of colour coding to try and make sure, okay, I've got all these pieces covered, I know where this is going, and then, like I said, I print it out onto paper and start cutting it out and putting it together. And so that's my little half model, not to scale or anything at all, just trying to work out what's going on. And that's the next example that you can see there, which is the digitally printed the purple hoodie and t-shirt. The challenge for this one was a friend of mine, a colleague, who's a skater, who said to me that you can't do menswear doing this process because it'll get too frilly, like flouncy or something. And so I designed me a hoodie. And I'm like, oh, right. And so I started to do it, but it started getting too kind of floppy and bouncing. I'm like, okay, what can I do? And so what I did is I embedded a t-shirt and a hoodie with the same pattern. And so what was excess became another design. So that's the pattern there. So it's both the hoodie and the t-shirt in the same thing. I've also made it in just plain black and it's basic knit and that kind of thing. And this was for an exhibition, which is also looking at digital print, new technologies and things, which is why it's like that. But it's revealing if you, it's all the masking tape, see the printed masking tape. It's kind of trying to reveal that process. So it's me trying to work out what dress to do with that. This is an example. This is actually a pattern which really embarrasses a lot of people. When I was, this was exhibited in Chicago, and the curator of the exhibition took her elderly aunt around, and when she got to see this one, she refused to look at it. She went bright red and wouldn't look at this pattern. And I'm not going to say what she saw in it, but I can. I know some people suggest that. But so this makes 3 garments. So it's about embedding multiple garments into a single pattern, so that you have kind of more creative control over what the pieces are. You don't just have to have all this extra stuff. You can use it for things that you actually want to use it for. And these are another 2 examples. So the one on the far side is it's the same pattern as you saw before, with a few little modifications. Just like when I made the first one, I was like, oh, I wasn't quite happy with certain aspects of it, so I changed it a bit. And this one on the side is a men's and trouser, and so it's the jacket, basic sleeve, fitted to the body, pants are really slim, very cool looking. And the only kind of slightly unusual thing about the suit design is the collar, which has kind of got a few sort of folds and things on it. But other than that, it fits really traditionally. I don't have that one here because my husband wears it. But that's it. So the suit is actually my husband, and then the dress is pair of pants underneath, and there's this little jacket that goes with the woman's outfit. So this is the cover of a catalogue for an exhibition which I was co-curator for, which is called Yield, and we brought together 30 designers from all over the world to kind of show all the possibilities, all the different things that you can do. And so it was originally held in Wellington at the new Dallas Art Museum, and then moved to Brooklyn, New York, at the Textile Art Centre. And it was a really interesting process bringing all these different designers together who have different approaches to this kind of thing, and it really showed me, because the more we were researching and thinking about who we could get to be part of it, the more people came out of the woodwork and said, yeah, I'm doing it too, I'm doing it in this way or that way. And it was a really great experience seeing how many different people were approaching this. This is the exhibition in the Dallas. And so those panels are the patterns almost full scale, so you can see a direct relationship between the patterns and the garments. So it was really important for us to help show people that connection. This is a garment that I designed for that exhibition, and it was intentionally really, really complicated. I wanted to really push myself, make something that was hard for me to do, and so this, it's got 3 pieces in it, a dress, a pair of kind of slim fitting cigarette style pants, and a kind of a waistcoat vest thing. It was, I think, 7 metres long. That particular pattern was quite outrageous. It was digitally printed as well, worked in collaboration with a New Zealand textile designer called Genevieve Packer, and that's the finished outfit. Kind of Japanese-esque thing that we came up with. Also been working, doing the Cutting Circle project, which is actually ongoing with Julie Roberts, and with some looking at ways of kind of collaborating with each other and bouncing ideas with each other, developing new kind of aesthetics and new approaches and that sort of thing. And last year in July we had a symposium at NAC to just kind of present some of the things we're doing, also to teach people different methods and approaches. So these are just some examples of some garments that came out of it. This particular pattern was inspired by Shingo Sato. You've heard of him? He's originally Japanese, he's based in Italy or Paris now, I think. And he does a method of pattern cutting called PR pattern, which is kind of drawing directly onto the dress form. It's very free, and so I was kind of combining his technique with zero waste and seeing what I came up with. And that's the dress that pattern made. I haven't actually ever made it as a finished thing, it's just a pin-drawn file, and just an experiment. And so the other thing I did was to see what I could come up with using in text again, and in this case it was far less planned, and I did this as a live demo. So I drew that, and then the demonstration I literally started coming and sewing it in front of 150 people. I had no idea what was going to happen, but that's what happened. That was the dress that I came up with in the end, and then I developed it further in the next dress that you can see there, the black one. That's the finished dress, and that's the pattern for it there. So this pattern here is actually it's not the yellow one, but the one next to it. It's a wee kind of drape top that is really simple pattern. It's basically armholes and a neck hole, and then some folding and draping and buttons and fastenings and stuff. And so it can be very simple. The thing is that the pattern for that can come up with multiple different variations on a similar idea, depending on how you fold it and kind of put it on the body, front, back, side seams, all that sort of thing. That one there is the yellow dress. Very light. And so this particular one, I'll go back to that one. It's only 3 pieces, three cut lines. So once again, really, really simple. And if it wasn't made of such soft tissuey fabric, it'd be simple to sew. Bad, however, it's not simple to sew. And it's also using excess from other things. So the black strip was a leftover piece that a friend gave me, and so that you can kind of combine different fabrics with each other. It doesn't have to be all the same fabric. That one there is a basic pencil skirt. Basic pencil skirt, because it's easy to do crazy looking things and kind of go overboard, but it's nice to show that it's quite simple and classic. So I'll just run through some of these. There's just a bunch of patterns, you can come up and talk to me about them later if you like. And that's how I draw. I don't draw a finished garment, that's my drawing, it's my sketching. It's me designing the pattern and the finished garment simultaneously. And then I might do a sketch at the end there after I've made it. This is an example of a men's jersey completely zero waste as well. The fabric's double-sided, spray on one side, black on the other, and so you can just flip it over and have different colourways. So basic methods, you can kind of deal with fixed areas. You can think about focusing a design around a particular thing that you don't want to move, there's sleeve that you want a particular fit, or it fits around the torso in a particular way, and then everything else revolves around it. You can divide pieces up. You can think about how to sort of ignore side seams and merge pieces together and nest things into each other, and then just kind of making up whole new shapes and patterns out of what's left over. And you also think about the fact that fabric's soft, and so if you've got a triangle shape and a circle shape, they can sew to each other. It'll create some interesting folds and lines and things, but there's no reason why they can't. They don't have to match and mirror perfectly, and what kind of interesting things come up from that. And then embedding multiple garments into a single pattern.
Wow.